Thank you very much, Senator Reed. Senator Reed is always accessible, whether I'm there going for the Asia Foundation or for the Chicago Council. He's knowledgeable, does a great job. I reminded him of our trip to Haiti some time ago when things were really difficult down there when we were members of the House. Next, I'll ask someone to join us on stage who is no stranger to this community. For 5 years, Dr. Shah championed global food and nutrition security as administrator of USAID. Prior to this, Raj served as Undersecretary for Research and Education at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and as the first Director of Agricultural Development Program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're pleased to have Raj now serve as a Senior Advisor to the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Please join me in giving a particularly warm welcome to Raj.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you, Doug, for that kind introduction, and Dan and Doug for having me here. I'd like to especially thank Ivo Dalder for your great leadership at the Chicago Council, and Alicia Black, who put a lot of this together, and so many of you from the public and private sector, civil society, and universities that have made the Chicago Council annual event on food security so central to this nation's capacity to lead the fight against hunger and to lead the challenge to produce enough food to feed 9 billion people in a sustainable and fair and equitable manner. This event has particular importance to me and to many of my colleagues, many of us together. It was from this podium, in fact, exactly at this spot in 2012, that President Obama launched the new Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition as part of the Feed the Future effort. So it is with great pride that we note that thanks to Administrator Gail Smith's leadership and so many others in the Obama administration and in the Congress that the Global Food Security Act has now passed both the House and the Senate in just the last weeks, and we look forward to seeing it reconciled and signed into law very soon. Please applaud and work towards that objective. I have a very simple task this morning. It's introducing a very good friend of mine, Tony Elumelu. Tony is an extraordinary African business leader, someone who has succeeded in the realm of financial services, real estate, energy and power, agriculture, healthcare, education, and has brought a passion to using private investment and private sector business leadership to create progress throughout the continent in Africa. His leadership and his civic engagement, not least of which the work of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, which is an official partner of the President's Young African Leaders Initiative and has supported more than 10,000 entrepreneurs across the continent, has expanded the basic idea that young, creative, dynamic private sector leaders can both build successful careers for themselves and transform their societies and communities in the process. And I think it's that combination of business and philanthropic efforts that led Tony a few years ago to start writing and talking more about Afrocapitalism, a very simple concept and philosophy that I think you see firsthand in the room here today, that by bringing together public sector and private sector partnership, investment, and efforts to drive growth and development, we can also fight poverty, expand the reach of dignity, and ensure that more people are part of a fair and integrated global economy. These public-private partnerships that Tony has fought so hard to create are, in fact, the answer to the challenge and the questions we ask ourselves through this Chicago Council event. To feed 800 million people, to move 800 million people out of a condition of hunger and to a condition of self-sufficiency, it will require that commercial perspective to be successful. And the task of dealing with the trend of urbanization will only be successfully addressed in the food security space with a strong public and private mindset. So it is with great honor and a lot of humility that I welcome Tony Elumelu to this event. And I believe there's a short video that will describe a little bit of Tony's work. Well, while we wait, I'll tell you an interesting story. When we were here at the event with President Obama, we had both Hillary Clinton and Lindsey Graham on stage together, talking nicely about each other and speaking about how we can work together to solve food security challenges around the world. I don't think you're going to see too much of that in this calendar year because apparently there's an election going on. But it is nice to see that this is an issue that brings together folks from both sides of the aisle to do important things together. No video. Okay, good. And with that as filler, I should note, let me just introduce Tony. But I will tell you, Tony and I have spent a lot of time together, and I've spent some time at his foundation. I've met the young entrepreneurs he's supported. And video or no video, you should know that these folks are grateful and inspired by his example, as am I, and I'm really thrilled, Tony, that you are our keynote speaker at this important Chicago Council event. Please welcome Tony Elumelu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Raj. I'm honored to be here this morning, and I'd like to thank and congratulate the co-chairs of the Chicago Council's Food and Agriculture Program, Dr. Glickman and Doug Beruta. Ambassador Ivo Dada, President of the Council, I commend this initiative. Distinguished policymakers, technocrats, investors, industry, researchers, journalists, academia, civil society, and scholars, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here. My name, as my good friend mentioned, is Tony Elumelu, and I'm the chairman of Heirs Holdings. Heirs Holdings is a Pan-African proprietary investment company that invests in strategic sectors of the African economy. I'm also the chairman of United Bank for Africa PLC, UBA, operates in 19 African countries with 1,000 operation branches across Africa and serving over 11 million Africans, and also has presence as the only African bank that is licensed in the United States of America. My other life, I'm the founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. I want to thank the United States government and the Chicago Council for your continuing leadership in matters of food security and emergency food assistance. The global food security paradox is a very sad one. On the one hand, there is more than enough food to feed the world's over 7 billion inhabitants. There are surpluses in mountains of grain, pyramids of meat, and rivers of milk in some world regions. On the other hand, too many people beg and hope for their next meal. The other sad paradox is that my continent, Africa, which holds 60% of the world's uncultivated land, is home to the largest population of chronically hungry, malnutrition, and in some years, starving people. And we are net importers of food. So my remarks will focus on this region and what we can do to address this situation. As the Chicago Council's report states, by 2050, the world's population will be 9 billion, and 66% of this population will live in cities. So we need to plan now to feed the future population. In Africa, the rate of migration from rural areas to cities is happening at an even more rapid pace. This is an undesirable phenomenon because farming in Africa is a labor-intensive endeavor. And when young people leave the rural areas, manpower is lost, along with the transfer of skill in crop cultivation and animal husbandry, which will cumulatively have negative consequences on food supply and cost in the country. To effectively tackle this problem, we first need to ask ourselves why this is happening. The result is simple. People move in search of better opportunities elsewhere and jobs. The high rate of urban migration in Africa, particularly among young people, is largely because the rural economy, which is predominantly agrarian, has been stagnant for so many years. Africa has a comparatively young population and needs to create millions of jobs a year for the over 10 million young men and women who will enter the workforce each year between now and 2030. If that challenge is met, Africa can indeed become the engine of global economic growth for years to come. If not, we risk mass unemployment, political and economic instability, social unrest, and in fact, greater threat of insecurity. In essence, this demographic dividend or boom could easily spell demographic doom for the continent and mankind as a whole. While the high rate of rural-urban migration in Africa has become a socio-economic, security, and environmental concern, it is important to understand that these young people are not fleeing from farming as an occupation. They are fleeing from poverty. The two have become conflicted because farming seems to have failed an entire generation of Africans. Too many young Africans have grown up watching their parents labor for a lifetime as subsistence farmers, only to remain desperately poor subsistence farmers, and in fact, die as poor farmers. African farmers mostly subsist on one growing season and only realize 1/5 of what US farmers would harvest from the same hectare of land. We need to turn around this sector, and the time to do so is now. The good news is we can do this, and I will show how later on when I discuss the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program, what we are doing in this area. This is an example of how excited young people can go about agriculture and become about agriculture when they have the tools and are presented with opportunities which facilitate success. I am an advocate of the philosophy of Africapitalism. Africapitalism asserts that the private sector must acknowledge and embrace its role in advancing development, particularly in Africa. Africapitalism promotes long-term investments in key strategic sectors which unlock both economic and social dividends. Agriculture is arguably the most strategic sector on the continent of Africa because it delivers 2 to 3 times the return on investment in terms of improved economic well-being as other sectors. 2, it represents 32% of Africa's GDP. And 3, it employs 65% of Africa's working population. Most importantly, it is the sector where the poorest on the continent are most likely to be engaged in their struggle to survive. Unlike in Western societies, Africa's farmers are among its poorest citizens. What this tells us is that to succeed, any program or initiative aimed at eradicating or alleviating poverty or stimulating job creation or facilitating gender empowerment must tackle agriculture sector. Basically, I believe that if we transform the agriculture sector on the continent, we will transform the entire continent. But we cannot achieve this transformation without addressing the critical nexus between strategic sectors of agriculture, transportation, and power, access to electricity. Economic sectors do not operate in isolation. They are interdependent on each other. In order to boost the agriculture sector, we need investments in roads to facilitate the transportation of produce and finished goods from rural areas to urban markets. We also need investments in energy for processing and preservation, particularly to support the cold chains required to meet the new dietary demands of urban consumers. And of course, we need financing to underpin all of these infrastructural needs and requirements. And we know that African governments do not have enough capital to deliver on this. The private sector, however, has and can access the capital, expertise, and discipline to meet these needs. Africapitalism indeed provides a solution to this. Africapitalism requires governments and the private sector to work in shared purpose to achieve what Dr. Jim Kim, the president of the World Bank, calls shared prosperity. That is, GDP must permeate multiple sectors and levels of society. Shared purpose is critical to achieving economic growth and development objectives. African governments are starting to understand this and working with the private sector to construct roads that open up rural and remote areas to move products to market and to connect countries to take advantage of larger regional markets. Between 2010 and 2014, the African Development Bank partnered with African governments and the private sector to finance the construction and rehabilitation of over 230,000 kilometers of feeder roads, enabling over 563 people to benefit from improved access to transport. In the power sector, working with the African governments and private sector leaders, President Obama's much-lauded Power Africa initiative is boldly tackling the challenge of expanding access to electricity that will unlock opportunity and growth across countless other sectors and innumerable businesses. Through Power Africa, the US government has engaged 120 public and private sector partners and marshaled over $43 billion to create 60 million new power connections. My company is part of this initiative. Through Transcorp Power, as Odin's subsidiary, we made a $2.5 billion commitment to deliver 2,500 megawatts of electricity under the Power Africa initiative. Transcorp is a key player in the Nigerian energy market and currently generates over 19% of Nigeria's total power. When investors respond to government commitments and step up to partner with them, that is shared purpose, and that is Africapitalism. Another example I would like to cite is that in response to the African Union's Maputo Declaration of 2003, where African governments committed to spend 10% of their national budgets on agricultural development, United Bank of Africa Group, the bank I chair, that operates in 19 African countries, stepped up to the plate and is now top lender in Nigeria among peer banks in supporting agriculture. When financial institutions recognize government priorities and deliver capital to amplify their efforts, that is shared purpose, and that is Africapitalism. As Odins is also directly invested in agriculture through the African Commodities Exchange and East African Exchange, which are commercial platforms in Nigeria and East Africa, aimed at helping subsistence farmers become entrepreneurs by giving them access to multiple and competing buyers so they can get better prices for their produce. And the benefits go on. And that, again, is shared purpose, and that is Africapitalism. If the public and private sector work together in shared purpose, we will be able to retain the knowledge and manpower needed in rural areas to support agriculture and control the rate of urbanization, because we will have made it possible for our young people to earn a good living and grow their businesses right where they were born and raised as agro-entrepreneurs. To illustrate this point, I'm going to tell or share with you the Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program. This is a $100 million program that my foundation seeded to help create the next generation of African leaders, because we believe, in line with the philosophy of Africapitalism, that the private sector must play a key role in helping to develop the African continent. And the pipeline to developing private sector in Africa starts with supporting entrepreneurs. And this is a program designed to help identify and support 10,000 African entrepreneurs who have ideas, and we say to them that their ideas can indeed transform Africa. Each of them benefits $10,000, and over a period of 10 years, 1,000 every year. These people are the missing middle identified in Chicago Council's report as the bridge between farming entrepreneurs and urban consumers. They are also developing the supply chain for the emerging urban African middle class that has disposable income and whose nutritional preference includes fresh fruits and vegetables. We found out through this program that 30% of the 65,000 applications we received between 2015 and 2016 are in the area of agriculture. That means 30% of the best 2,000 ideas selected to benefit from this merit-based program are agro-based. What this tells us is that Africa's entrepreneurs have not given up on agriculture. They see it as a sector full of opportunities that will bring them wealth. This mentality is good, moving away from seeing farming or agriculture as a social service. And they are innovative, and they have very scalable and transformative business ideas, and this is what will help to lift agriculture further in Africa and help ultimately to address the food security problem in the world. These entrepreneurs and others like them in other sectors are going to make a world of difference in Africa. They are the people that will fuel Africa's economic future. And of all my investments over nearly 30 decades on the African continent, I believe these entrepreneurs will prove to be the best investments that I have made. I want to wrap up my remarks about the impact of urbanization, public-private sector collaboration, and entrepreneurship on food security in Africa by saying that I believe that agriculture is an inherently profitable sector because people must eat. Elementary economics taught us that at zero income, one thing people do is they must feed. And it is agriculture that produces that, so it's a viable sector. Prioritizing and transforming this sector in Africa is not just a moral imperative. It is a smart business strategy that will save lives, unlock jobs, grow economies, and stabilize regions. Investing in agriculture not only gives us the ability to achieve the SDG 2 goals, or goal 2 of hunger or ending hunger, it also has the ability to help achieve other SDG sustainable development goals such as food, such as good health, economic growth, and infrastructure, thereby transforming the entire continent. Everyone, from the public to the private, the scientific, academic, media, and non-profit sectors, has a role to play, and we must work in shared purpose to achieve this. I started by recognizing U.S. global leadership on matters relating to hunger and food security, and I want to finish there, although digressing to discuss emergency food aid because it is an important debate in the U.S. foreign policy cycles. When it comes to foreign assistance, there's no match for the decades of generosity of the American people. What I want to urge you is to ensure that even as we work to prevent food crisis by investing in agriculture, when it becomes necessary to feed people, that the U.S. provides the most effective kind of assistance and help. Every year, the U.S. provides over $1 billion in food aid globally. This is a life-saving policy, and every life is precious. What is missing, though, from this policy developed in the 1960s, is flexibility. In some cases, food will need to be shipped to some places to save lives. But in other cases, food is available in the affected region, and this food that is available in the affected region can be bought more cheaply, delivered much faster, and without distorting local markets. The distortion of local markets is a critical issue because no matter how hard they try, local farmers cannot compete with free food. I know that no American wants to save lives while impoverishing local and regional farmers. Therefore, it is time to empower the administrator of USAID with the maximum flexibility to provide the best assistance in any given food crisis. The food aid set aside is but a drop in the ocean of the U.S. agricultural output and shipping routes. Regardless, food aid must not become an industry. Those involved should be seeking to work themselves out of a job. Policy making is not for the faint of heart. It requires knowledge and requires courage. We know that flexibility is the right way to do food aid that will save more lives. I want to appeal to the U.S. Congress and the next President of the United States of America to join champions like Representatives Ed Royce, Elliot Engel, and Senators Bob Corker and Chris Coons in making the cost-effective and courageous decision to pass bills that fight famine with flexibility. And I'm appealing to all of you here to do your best to make sure they do this. Thank you very much.
Entrepreneurship is a long-term journey. Dare to dream, implement your dream, and stay focused.
It is the right time to be from this continent. You are standing at a time when there's no disparity between African knowledge and the knowledge of the world. You are standing at a time where coming together as African entrepreneurs, you are in the place where one of the largest growths is emerging in the world. But the critical thing I want to say to you is that you are the first generation that's going to understand this, that modernization does not have to be westernization, that you have the capacity inside you as Africans to compete with the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, we also have the founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation and chairman of Heirs Holdings, Mr. Tony Elumelu, CON.
The highlight of the TIP bootcamp was a surprise appearance from the Vice President of Nigeria, the Prime Minister of Benin Republic, and the Governor of Kaduna State, who all spoke on the importance of supporting entrepreneurship across Africa.
Thank you very much, Tony, for a really inspirational and challenging presentation. Your keynote, you can see the kind of inspiration he brings to African young audiences and others. He provides us some real compliments as Americans. We have to see if we can match his expectations and compliments.